Welcome the disciplines. Can't give you much better advice than that, because disciplines create the reality. Disciplines build bridges, build cities. Disciplines, a well-disciplined activity creates abundance, creates uniqueness, productivity. Next, fight for what's right. It's a fight we're in. The storyteller says, and there was great war in heaven. Wow, you mean way back there? Yes. 1/3 of the angels conspired. I asked Bill Bailey, how long do you suppose it took 1/3 of these angels to get together? Did they conduct meetings? I don't know. Bailey says the storyteller doesn't say. I said, then we're supposed to use our imagination. I don't know. It does say finally the great war occurred, and the 2/3 prevailed and the 1/3 lost. One of the writers of later scripture, here's what he said: I fought a good fight. See, that's extraordinary to be able to say. I fought for my kids, and I fought for what was right, and I fought for my good health, and I fought to protect my company, and I fought for a good career that would bless my family. I fought a good fight. It's good to fight. The encroachment. Opposites are in conflict, and we're in the middle. And if you want something valuable, you got to fight for it. Then this writer also said, not only have I fought a good fight, and I'll finish with this, and I got a much longer list, but maybe I can cover these at another time. He said, I fought a good fight, and I kept the faith. See, that's the deal. Keep faith with your family. Fight like crazy and keep faith. Fight the enemy and keep faith. Fight illness and keep faith. Fight the evil and keep faith. I can't give you much better advice.
Woz and I started Apple in my parents' garage when I was 20. We worked hard, and in 10 years, Apple had grown from just the two of us in a garage into a $2 billion company with over 4,000 employees. We just released our finest creation, the Macintosh, a year earlier, and I just turned 30. And then I got fired. How can you get fired from a company you started? Well, as Apple grew, we hired someone who I thought was very talented to run the company with me. And for the first year or so, things went well. But then our visions of the future began to diverge, and eventually we had a falling out. When we did, our board of directors sided with him. And so at 30, I was out, and very publicly out. What had been the focus of my entire adult life was gone, and it was devastating. I really didn't know what to do for a few months. I felt that I had let the previous generation of entrepreneurs down, that I had dropped the baton as it was being passed to me. I met with David Packard and Bob Noyce and tried to apologize for screwing up so badly. I was a very public failure, and I even thought about running away from the valley. But something slowly began to dawn on me. I still loved what I did. The turn of events at Apple had not changed that one bit. I'd been rejected, but I was still in love. And so I decided to start over. I didn't see it then, but it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again, less sure about everything. It freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life. During the next 5 years, I started a company named Next, another company named Pixar, and fell in love with an amazing woman who would become my wife. Pixar went on to create the world's first computer animated feature film, Toy Story, and is now the most successful animation studio in the world. In a remarkable turn of events, Apple bought Next, and I returned to Apple, and the technology we developed at Next is at the heart of Apple's current renaissance. And Lorene and I have a wonderful family together. I'm pretty sure none of this would have happened if I hadn't been fired from Apple. It was awful tasting medicine, but I guess the patient needed it. Sometimes life's going to hit you in the head with a brick. Don't lose faith. I'm convinced that the only thing that kept me going was that I loved what I did. You've got to find what you love, and that is as true for work as it is for your lovers. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking and don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know when you find it. And like any great relationship, it just gets better and better as the years roll on. So keep looking, don't settle.
It's an idea that says that when you put forth effort, you get reward. When you throw your heart and mind and soul into something, you get something back. Now, in my book, I call that notion, that belief that effort brings reward, meaningful work. And when you look at the lives of people who are really successful, what you see over and over again is this idea of meaningful work is embedded in their consciousness. You know, I tell a story in the book of the Beatles. Everybody knows about the Beatles. They come here in 1964 and the British invasion. The most interesting thing about the Beatles is what happened to them before they came to America. In the 1960 and 1959, when they were just kids, they were invited to go to Hamburg in Germany to be the house band at a strip club. And they went there and they stayed there for months on end. And 7 days a week, they played 8-hour sets, night after night in this strip club, right? And over the course of that extraordinary crucible, that experience of playing, they taught themselves how to be a great band, right? In fact, we think now that by the time the Beatles came to America, they had played together as a live band 1,200 times. We could go to all of the clubs on Friday night in San Francisco where all the promising young bands are playing. I submit to you would not find a single band that has played together 1,200 times, right? Just doesn't happen. So what made the Beatles special? What made them special is that they were willing to play together 1,200 times, willing to play 8-hour sets 7 nights a week, 4 months at a stretch. And why were they willing? Because they believed in the notion of meaningful work. They had an opportunity to throw their heart and mind into something and get something back. And that made all the difference in the world. You know, I interviewed Bill Gates for my book, and because I was really curious about what happened to him as a kid, because, you know, he has, as many of you will know, he has this extraordinary experience as a 13-year-old. In 1969, he goes to his school in 8th grade, and they have a teletype machine hooked into a mainframe, which allows him to do real-time programming at the age of 13 in 1969. Those of you who know your computer history will know that nobody was doing real-time programming in 1969, let alone 13-year-olds, right? If you had access to a computer at all, you were using those, remember those clumsy old computer cards, which meant you could do one run every, you know, whatever it was, 3 days. He was doing the real thing from the age of 13 on. And how did he respond to that opportunity? He threw his heart and mind into it. He never left that room, right? He ran up computer bills like you would not believe, because remember, computer time was incredibly expensive then. He told me a story that when he was in 11th grade, Paul Allen, who was his classmate, right, found out that there was a mainframe in the health center at the University of Washington that was free, wasn't being used between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. On weekday mornings. And so he would go to bed at like 10 o'clock, pretend to his parents he was getting an early night, and set his alarm clock for 1:30, sneak out the window, walk 2 miles to the University of Washington in pitch black, and program from 2 until 6. Right? In fact, he told me one of the reasons he gives so much money to the University of Washington now is he feels guilty about stealing so much computer time from them. The other hilarious thing is his mother years later said, you know, when she heard that story for the first time, she was like, you know, we always wondered why it was so hard to get him out of bed in the morning. Right? Now, why does he do that? Why does he go to those extraordinary lengths? Because he has the right attitude, right? He was able to capitalize on his ability, not because he's some genius or, you know, I think he's really, really smart. Is he Einstein? I don't know. That's not what sets him apart. What sets him apart is that he had a belief in meaningful work. He was willing to throw his heart and mind into something because he knew he'd get something back. And that attitude is what allowed him to develop his abilities in the way that he did.
People like Louis XIV or 50 Cent, the sort of combination of historical and contemporary figures, I noticed that they all shared certain qualities and they had gone through a similar kind of apprenticeship and process. So the book itself is sort of a synthesis of all my other work. It's sort of what I consider to be the ultimate form of power, which is mastering your field and being creative. If you have a mind that now is so enriched with knowledge and knows your field so well, you can make all kinds of interesting associations between different ideas and see things that other people don't see. That's like the philosopher's stone of power. You can be in any situation in life. You could be stranded on an island, you could be fired. You'll get yourself back to the top because you know how to think and you know how to be creative. The key to it all is knowing who you are. And what I say is, it seems poetic, but it's not actually poetic. All of us are born unique, and scientifically, your DNA will never be replicated, never happened before, never will happen again. There is something about you that's unique. Now, you could say the same thing about a duck or a lamb, but they don't have consciousness. They can't express their uniqueness. A human being can. This uniqueness that you had when you were born manifested itself by certain things you were drawn to. You were drawn to games, strategy, chess, that you'd be like a Napoleon, or you're drawn to music, or you were drawn to visual patterns, or you were drawn to sports and things like that. It's very primal, and it's showing something about you that's unique. And I compare it to a kind of a voice that's inside of you. It's a voice that you're 5 or 6 years old that's sort of saying, this is what you're interested in, Robert, or this is what you really like, Allison. And as we get older, that voice tends to become drowned out by your parents who are saying, go to law school, be a doctor, I'm doing the Jewish parent here, or money's the prime thing, I gotta be comfortable, this is a tough world to live in. And that voice gets drowned out. And in your 20s and 30s, you can kind of fake it. If you end up in a field like you go into law, and really, there are people who were maybe born to be lawyers. I have nothing against it. Abraham Lincoln loved law, and that maybe was his life's task. But a lot of people go into law, and that isn't their dream. It's not what they were drawn to as a child, You can fake your way when you're in your 20s and 30s. Because you're young, life's exciting, money can be sort of a motivating factor. But what happens is you're less and less engaged in your work. You're not connected deeply. You're kind of bored. You're not paying deep attention. You're sort of skating by. And by your late 30s, it starts to catch up with you. And people are coming up who are younger than you, who are handsomer, who are less expensive. They replace you. You're downsized. You're out of a job. And suddenly you don't have the skills to adapt because you didn't really follow something you were meant to follow. And the people who know themselves, it's not a matter of just simply becoming a rock star and playing the guitar because that's what you felt like. You have to be practical. You have to find something that's related to your interests that you can live in and make money. But those are the ones that end up doing much better in their 30s and 40s, making more money and being a lot happier, not necessarily choosing that high-powered job when they were younger. So it's a matter of connecting with that voice that was very clear in childhood. I think the people who are experiment in their 20s, who learn different skills, who aren't so hung up on money, they're going to be the ones in their 30s and 40s who are going to be running this world, who are going to be making money, who are going to be found.
And I think that's a great point.
And I've seen it in not only in history, but I have 80,000 examples of this, as I told you, of people like that. They're the ones that in their 30s and 40s are going to be running this world. They have built up so many different skills. And the other thing is, we all know this, when you're motivated, you can move mountains, right? So if you're learning a foreign language and you're kind of have to because it's a requirement in college, you're not really paying attention. If you have a French girlfriend and you're living in France and you like French literature, suddenly you're paying attention, and in 2 weeks you can learn more than what you learned in 2 years of French at the university because you're motivated. So when you're curious and excited about a field, you're going to learn it really well, and when you learn it really well, you enter this, what I call a cycle of accelerated returns. They call it in chemistry autocatalysis. one bit of success leads to another, leads to another. It sets in this sort of catalytic process where the mind suddenly jumps into gear and you become creative because you're motivated, and you can, if you learn something in 2 years intensely, it's 10 times the value than if you learned it in 10 years. So motivation is the key to mastery, and you're not going to be motivated if you were destined to be a writer and you're studying law.